Sri Aurobindo particularly means by spirituality because it's a term which is not understood well and clearly by people when they use it. Mostly people who do not understand use it more often than people who understand it, I think. Spirituality, they think anything idealistic or anything that pertains to some ethical higher value of life is spiritual. If you are doing some public work or something which is to do with altruism, service, or some kind of work with spirituality. Spirituality, they think you must immediately go and do something for somebody else. Otherwise, it's not spirituality. Immediately you are spiritual, the first thing you do is to go and tell everyone that here is spirituality or something like that, you see. Or at least what they must do, and by trying to do good to other people. Now, spirituality can do good to other people, but the way of spiritual action and other action, you see, this is the difficulty. And they always turn up whenever there is a question of referring to some spiritual person. What they at once bring emphatically before the public and their own mind is what he did for so many other people. They do not refer to what he attained. No, they refer to what he did. The question to be pointed out, the real thing to be pointed out is what they attained and what it was for which they stood, the truth. No, it is what they did to other people. Now, this is a very secondary point of view from the point of view of the spiritual man. Spiritual man, if he at all lets other people into his inner life or outer life, is that they should also make an effort to live that inner truth. He is not interested in making people happy, except by realizing the truths which they have also realized. He is not interested in solving the problem of humanity. He is not out for social service. If he is out at all for service, it is service of the divine in man, and then it is by man attaining his divinity that he would want them to attain happiness. You see, but these things are not understood at all, even by the topmost intellectuals of today. This I can tell you without any fear of contradiction, because I have seen in the papers any number of declarations saying this is spiritual, which has nothing to do with spirituality. You can say idealism, disciplining yourself for pursuit of a moral value of life or a moral, code observed in life is a step towards spirituality. That is possible. That is true. It can lead you to spirituality. It can be your first, approach to spiritual life, because it will make you understand the need of self-control. It will make you acquire self-control. It will give you discipline. It will give you a lot of understanding of yourself, in the sense that whatever contradicts your moral, code or moral ideal or principle will be noticed by you in your own self. And that will give you the beginning of introspection. You will be able to watch yourself all the time and see what is contradicting your moral, you can say, decision or will or moral ideal. You see, if you have taken the vow of simplicity, and if you are attracted by things which require you to have many things, then you immediately notice this is against simplicity. If you adopted the idea of controlling your taste, then immediately you are attracted by taste. You notice that, oh, this is wrong. This is against my principle. You see, if you have taken up that you will not acquire property, that you will only get what is needful for you, and so you will acquire money or things to the extent that you need. You will have no more accumulation or money gathered. Well, in that case, as soon as you get the greed for money, you will notice that this is not correct in keeping with my, the vow or the idea which I have accepted in life. So, non-possession of wealth or service or ideal of justice or equality, if you are, out for the ideal of realizing equality, immediately you feel that you are superior to other people. You will feel that you are going against your own ideal, is it not? So that makes you go through a process of introspection in a partial way, and that might be the beginning of, the spiritual life. It can be the first step towards spiritual life if you know We keep an opening that morality or ethics or intellectual ideal are not the highest reach of the human consciousness. Well, if we understand, then you know that to keep the way open. Most people don't do it. And in the present times, the only craze is that you must do something for others. There is so much stress on to do and to act, and very little stress on to be, to become, and to change. Very little. It is all do, must do. Why you must do, what you must do, whether what you do is proper, whether this is the solution. You shouldn't stop to think. You must do immediately. You must rush about doing things. And because you are rushing about and trying to do things, you must be satisfied that you are doing real service to the world or progressing or you are acting according to spirituality in you. The fact of being, the fact of change of one's own being is not accepted as an act. Today, the fact that if you change your center of consciousness, it is a work. This is not understood at all. Work is only when you throw yourself out on others, throw yourself all round, then it's work. If you raise the center of your consciousness, it is not considered as work at all. But as there is a verb to do and to act, there is another verb to be and to become. And if you be also, you are working. If you be unselfish, if you be unegoistic, if you be without desire, you are working. You are not idle. But this part of thing is not understood. So when I went to Benares and I had to speak to the university, I took opportunity to make this point clear. And therefore I gathered from Aurobindo some of his own, the idea about what he says about spirituality, so that there will be no question about what he thought. Whatever else anybody else may think, there is here Aurobindo's authentic, his own declaration about what he understands by spirituality. So I wrote like that. Some words are often used by men without knowing their full and exact meaning. Spirituality is such a term. Almost everyone who uses it hardly knows its meaning. It is used or is intended to be used against materialism. When you say spirituality, it is generally intended that you are trying to say something against materialism. But that is not its true sense. Politicians use it mostly as a platitude, because that serves their purpose, you see. Others connect it with asceticism. When you think of spirituality, you must think of yellow robe or jungle or forest or standing on head or sitting on lion's skin or something like that. Otherwise, how can it be spiritual? You must be that. So think of asceticism. Or some even feel that spirituality is escape from life. They actually say like that. Some of the leaders in India and outside. They always declare that, when you are spiritual, you are escaping from life. Now, I don't know what is escape from life, because sometimes when people take up more activity, it might be to escape from their own difficulty, you see. Activity itself can be an escape. This escapes their mind. They don't see that taking up too much action might also be seeking an escape from their own view of their own self, because when you sit down and look at yourself, it may not be very pleasant, you see. It's all right to sit down near a mirror and prepare yourself, but if you sit too long, you'll find out that it's not very pleasant. It is something that reveals to you that there is a lot to be corrected, a lot to be set right. Escape from life, escape from which life? You see, what is an escape? An escape from where? An escape into what? If I gave the instance, you see, that if there is a scientist, for instance, like Jagdish Chandra Bose, or an eminent scientist like this is Danish man who is an atom specialist, you see, or a man like Einstein. Now he says that, he wants to devote himself entirely to scientific research. Will you call him an escapist? Because he doesn't come and lecture somewhere in a square where everybody shouts and you have some slogans and everybody claps at the end of it. Is it an escape? If a man takes up a job or a work in which he feels he can best first of all develop himself and serve also humankind, humanity, by whatever contribution he is able to make by making progress in that line. Could it be called an escape because he does not come and participate in those activities which you consider to be very necessary for a man's existence on earth? Why? What is an escape? If Ramakrishna Paramahansa sits down in a temple near Calcutta and realizes the divine, how does he escape? What is escape? It's not an escape. It is applying yourself to the best of your ability to the most serviceable part that you can perform in society, isn't it? I mean, you are taking up that part which you think is one to which you are called, one. And it is in that line you believe you can serve best, not only yourself but everybody else. If Rabindranath Tagore did not go to jail and ply the charkha, which he did not, well, some people think that, oh, he is not, you see, he is not doing what, he is escaping. It's not escape at all. His fulfillment is not in that line. What is to be done? It's quite different if a house is on fire and you expect everybody else to put his pail of water. That's all right. So if there is a crisis, you expect everybody to leave all his avocations aside and help you a little. But normally you don't expect a man to give up his inmost call or vocation to which he is called and apply himself to so-called work of the public in which nothing happens to the public, ultimately. Yes, there are people who equate spirituality with ethical conduct and even with ideals of service. And Sir, I think Casaling it was who said that altruism is the highest form of egoism. To believe that you are doing good to others is the acme of egoism. What is good of others? How do you know what is good for others? Oh, you believe that. Many people will, just your opponent also believes that what he says is good for others. You see, the idea that I am serving others and I can do good to others is very pride, great pride and egoism. In fact, spirituality wouldn't want you to have it. Spirituality wants you to get rid of that idea that you see, you are doing something to others and so on. If you will do something, it is to the divine, and because divine is in you and divine is in them, and so you are serving the divine in them, that's all. At the maximum, I mean, it's not at all that you are doing anything for anybody else. But that idea is there, and people believe that is altruism, and that is something part of spirituality, which is also not true. The explanation and definition of the term given by Sri Aurobindo is precise, and I think it's better that I give it in the original. Spirituality has evidently to do with the word spirit. And because spirit is non-material or believed to be non-material, spirit is believed to be divine, an essential element present in all men. The spirit is present in all people. Then Sri Aurobindo says that, but at first, now there's a quotation beginning, you see, at first this truth of the spirit and of spirituality is not self-evident to the mind of man. Man becomes mentally aware of his soul as something other than his body. That's how he feels first. When you say soul, it's something other than his body, superior to his normal mind and life. But he has no clear sense of it, only a feeling of some of its effects on his nature. Some effect is produced on his nature, and he may be able to feel that may be my soul. As these effects take a mental form, the effect of the soul to the human being is felt in his mind. It takes a mental form or a life form that is connected with life. The difference is not firmly and trenchantly drawn between mind and the spirit acting on mind and giving some mental form to whatever the spirit wants to do, or a life form to whatever the spirit wants one to accept. The difference is not firmly trenchantly drawn. The soul perception does not acquire a distinct and assured independence. You are not independently conscious of your soul or self or spirit. You are conscious of something that works on your mind, something that works on your life and changes it, guides it, and so on. But what it is, you are not independently conscious of its existence. Very commonly, indeed, a complex of half effects of the psychic pressure on the mental and the vital parts, a formation mixed with mental aspiration, mental formation mixed with mental aspiration, and vital desires is mistaken for the soul. Just as separative ego is taken for the true self, although the self in its true being is universal as well as individual in its essence. Or just as mixture of mental aspiration, vital enthusiasm and ardor uplifted by some kind of strong or high belief or self-dedication or altruistic eagerness is mistaken for spirituality. If you find a man very eager and ardent and dedicating himself to something which he believes to be true, this is spirituality. It is not. It is not. There are organizations in which hundreds of people are working perhaps with that spirit, with half belief, with half understanding, with full faith, and perhaps with very great dedication, with enthusiasm and with all kinds of, vital and emotional outbursts, but that hardly makes it spiritual. That is why he is pointing out that just as a mixture of mental aspiration and vital enthusiasm and ardor, uplifted by some kind of strong and high belief that this is the cause and this must be done, or self-dedication or altruistic eagerness. There are people who have that eagerness. You can see so many organizations with that kind of eagerness, telling that such and such a day something must happen, and so everybody must be made to do something on that day or at that movement or for that movement, and so on. They always go about. Now that is altruistic eagerness. It's not spirituality. But they think it is spiritual work, actually. They seriously think it is spiritual work. He finds that these misconceptions are quite natural in the present state of man's development. He does not blame man for having these incomplete or imperfect ideas. He quotes, I quote again from Life Divine, but this vagueness and these confusions are inevitable as a temporary stage in the evolution, which, because ignorance is its starting point, and the whole stamp of our first nature must necessarily begin with an imperfect intuitive perception and an instinctive urge or a seeking without any acquired experience or clear knowledge. So if one has a mixture of mind and vital or an ardor or altruistic motive or some mental aspiration mixed with some ideal and so on, well, it is excusable. That is what man can have in the beginning of his spiritual uplift. Even the formations which are the first effects of the perception or urge, or the first indices of a spiritual evolution, must inevitably be of this incomplete and tentative nature. But the error so created comes very much in the way of true understanding of spirituality. It doesn't allow one to understand true spirituality. Then he clarifies the meaning of the word by first stating what spirituality is not, so that you know it by elimination rather than by affirmation. You know it by what spirituality is not. It must therefore be emphasized, he says, that spirituality is not high intellectuality. People studying philosophy think that they are spiritual. They are only thinking of how much money they will get at the end of the month. Or perhaps they are thinking what promotion they will get at the end of 2 years, or whom they were to flatter in order to get into some committee to be appointed examiners. That's what they are doing, And when they are teaching philosophy, they think they are spiritual. They have no idea what is spirituality at all. They might be reading books. That's another thing. To be spiritual and to read books on spirituality is not the same thing. But many people have an idea that now I am reading and adopt a mental attitude and say, oh, I have done yoga. How do you know? Oh, world is like this. I am not the actor, this, that. It's a mental talk, which they can always do without any correspondence. When something actually happens, when nature gives a step, then you find out whether he believed it or not. It is so long as no test comes, everybody can go on maintaining his idea of what is spirituality and so on, wrong, half right, or absolutely false. But as soon as any test comes, it is found out that it was only an idea somewhere held, nothing to do with actual concrete realization. It must therefore be emphasized that spirituality is not high intellectuality, not idealism. People who believe in some ideal, but that's not spirituality, equality or service or fraternity or democracy or justice or it's not spirituality, it's idealism. Not an ethical turn of mind or moral purity or austerity. Hitler was very austere. Didn't mean any spirituality. A man who is very, vitally strong to impose himself, he can impose a very strong discipline on himself. But that wouldn't prove it spiritual. It's not moral purity or austerity, not religiosity. Going to temple 10 times or taking bath 5 times or praying down 20 times. Well, it doesn't mean spirituality. Yes, religiosity or an ardent and exalted emotional fervor. Ardent and exalted emotional fervor. Not even a compound of all these excellent things. Mixture of all these things if you have, it doesn't amount to spirituality. A mental belief, creed or faith, an emotional aspiration, a regulation of conduct according to a religious or ethical formula are not spiritual achievement and experience. Are not spiritual achievement and experience. These things are of considerable value to mind and life. They are of value to spiritual evolution itself as a preparation, as a preparatory movement, disciplining, purifying, or giving a suitable form to the nature. This is the contribution that they can make, but they are not by themselves spirituality. But they still belong to the mental evolution, the beginning of a spiritual realization, experience, or change is not yet there. So you see how much how many wrong ideas about in the spiritual world, and people think that is spirituality. This is spirituality. Then he gives the correct connotation of in what consists spirituality. Spirituality is in its essence an awakening to an inner reality of our being. When you awaken that there is inner reality in my own self, that is the first sign that spirituality, is awakening. To a spirit, self, soul, which is other than our mind, other than life, other than body. An inner aspiration to know, to feel, to be that. An inner aspiration to know, to feel, to be that. To enter into contact with a greater reality beyond and pervading the universe, which inhabits our own being. To be in communion with it, union with it, and a turning, a conversion, a transformation of our whole being as a result of the aspiration, contact, the union, a growth or a waking into a new becoming, a new being, a new self, and a new nature. That is spirituality. Well, it leaves nothing in doubt. If you can follow it, it's quite clear. So you see, spirituality is something so different from what men are accustomed to think about it.
And what book is this definition of his writing?
Life Divine. Page 763. It may be different pages, but this page is page 763, the last one that I gave. Now, there is another side also of this same question, that people Whenever spirituality is talked of seriously and in certain circles, they always say that, yes, but you see, you must use it for life. What's use of a man reaching the divine consciousness if he does not do good to humanity? That's how it is put to themselves, you see. And they expect, they demand or request or require that a truly spiritual person must satisfy or conform to this idea. Now there is a great mistake in this approach to the use of spirituality for society or for man and for the world. It doesn't mean that spirituality cannot be effective. It means to ask it to be effective in your way or in the common way is not the right way of demanding. Spirituality can be an effective force in man's life, but it must become a dynamic factor in individual and collective life. Today, life is dominated by the vital being of man, the desired soul of man. Both individual and collective life are under the domination, touched occasionally by either intellectual idealism or ethical values, which have just begun to exert some influence on the collective life of humanity. There are, what is it? Well, these are, yes, necessary pity. Yeah, these things which happen to mankind and which have been already current in society today, these are necessary palliatives. But the real need of the situation is psychological, not political, only, or economical, or ethical. And a psychological change can come only, or can be brought about only by awakening the spirit, the soul in man. It may be, and it is, a slow process, but then a truly radical cure for human problems cannot be expected to be quick or easy. The demand sometimes made upon spirituality by men who are busy solving problems of life, to demand of spirituality to work for humanity, to help them in solving so-called pressing problems, only shows how little they understand about the nature of the problem itself. They don't understand what is the nature of the problem. Problem is man. You see, that they don't understand. I quote Aurobindo in relation to this. Spiritual evolution in man is not to be judged from this outer point of view. Its real work is not to solve human problems on the past or present mental basis, but to create a new foundation of our being and our life and knowledge. Problem is to change the very foundation, and you want them to act on the present foundation. Therefore, he repeats this question again and continues the subject, you see. Spirituality cannot be called upon to deal with life by non-spiritual method. You want problem of life to be solved by a non-spiritual method, or attempt to cure its ill by panaceas, the political, social, or other mechanical remedies which the mind is constantly attempting and which have always failed and will continue to fail to solve anything. The most drastic changes made by these means change in nothing. Man remains what he was, moved by ego, governed by vital desires and passions and the needs of the body, unspiritual and superficial in his outlook, ignorant of his own self and the forces that drive and use him. That is what man remains. And that is the problem. Only a spiritual change evolution of his being from the superficial mental toward the deeper spiritual consciousness can make the real and effective difference. And that can be done by awakening the inner life in him and psychological awakening in him. Spiritual truth is a truth of the spirit, not a truth of the intellect, not a mathematical theorem or a logical formula. Truth of the infinite, not a truth of thought, mental idea, because mental idea only represent, formulate some facet of the truth. But this truth of which he speaks here is one has to know it. And to know it is to grow into it, to be it. That is the problem, you see. That brings you to the some kind of idea of what is spirituality, and I think it clarifies some basic concepts of spiritual life. Well, I can try something about Buddhism just at a beginning. I think we can make some start with Buddhism because we want to have just a little outlook. Not that we are keen on it, but just to see how it seems from the point of view which we are evolving in our study here, you see. So before I give that, some historical data is necessary to put our mind in contact with Buddhism. You know that Buddha, was born in 560 BC. Clearly 500 years before Christ. More than 500, 560 years before Christ. And he lived up to 480, to the age of 80, that is 480 BC, 560 BC. He was born among the Shakya and the Koliya tribes. The Koliyas, they were called Kolayas or Koliyas. In the north of India, at Lumbini, the village which is 100 miles north of Benares. Just straight away north from Benares, 100 miles. It is now in Bihar, I think, at the foot of Nepal. You see, partly Nepal and north of Bihar. He was married at 16. There was a very fine story about his marriage. It was a marriage by what you call, competitive marriage, in the sense that I think there was something was put there as a test, and you had to cut the lamb or the goat at one stroke of the sword, you see, and everybody failed, and Buddha succeeded, and that's how he married Yashodhara, his wife, you see. Well, that was the test put for the young princes or young people who were called to participate in the choice. His son was born, and at 29, he left his house after the birth of his first son, the only child, you see. It was the birth must be 28, and he left his house at 29. Now, the cause of leaving house was the being troubled by the inevitable badge of human suffering, you see, and its incidence on human life. Sickness, old age, infirmity, death, and all kinds of things that are, that flesh is there too, as they say, you see. And the feeling can be described in something like what C.D. Lewis said in one of his poems, C.D. Lewis has put in one of his poems this idea: lying awake one night, he saw eternity stretched like a howl of pain. Well, Buddha must have felt that, I think, you see. Lying awake one night, he saw eternity stretched like a howl of pain. Well, that is how Buddha must have looked at the world, I think. Anyhow, he took to mortification when he left his house, you see. Mortification of the flesh means he surrendered himself to all kinds of not eating and fasting and waking and standing on head perhaps, or doing all kinds of impossible things and so on. For 5 to 6 years he pursued that subject and found it doesn't pay, it doesn't change anything because of the pressure, so he left. One day he became absolutely unconscious on account of hunger, you see. And I think it is Sujata, one of the shepherd girls who was passing, you see, and he saw that this man was almost dead. You see, and the description is very vivid. His stomach has touched his spinal cord. You see? And she thought that he was almost dead but found some sign of life. So she poured some goat's milk into his throat and he revived. So all his life he was obliged to her because that taught him also the lesson that mortification is not the way. She took him to his house afterward, to her house, and then he learned that no, this extreme is not the way. Then he chalked out what they call the middle path, you see. Yes, not too much of this side, not too much on that side, but remain in the middle or something like that, you see. Well, going about meeting many persons and many spiritual personalities, but he accepted none of them and sat down one day at the bottom of the Bodhi tree with a firm resolution and got enlightenment when he was 35. At 35, he got his enlightenment. And during this, you find that from that time to 80th year, means for about 45 years, the years of his ministry, as you say, you see, he preached the gospel, the truth that he had found. And that was the remedy for suffering of man, is the abandonment of possessive tendencies, abandon of desire, intensity to hold things, you see, acquisitive tendency. Trishna, he called it, tinna, that is the word they use. The language was at that time, I think, it was Pali, you see. Ardhamagdi it is called, Magad, that is Ardhamagdi language, in which all his writings also have been embodied and written. And he suggested as a practical remedy the Eightfold Path, but that will come to afterwards. But the organization, after 45 years of his ministry, there were many people who followed him. Small band, it began with a small number, but it increased gradually. And during 45 years, all the work was done on foot, you must remember. Buddha didn't even travel all over India. He traveled a tract of about 250 by 100. That's all. 250 miles by 100. That's all the tract that he covered during 45 years. And that was quite intensive work in one sense, but from our point of view, very limited. There was no radio. So he couldn't talk to people across the seas, as Buddha could talk now if he was here. Well, but that created an intense field for his operation and established his view by creating a sincere following during his lifetime. And the books were organized not by him. Books are not written by Buddha. The Buddhistic Tripitaka, what is called the canon, is not creation of Buddha, just as Bible is not the writing of Christ. Same as Gita is not the writing of Krishna, you see. And this is a very unfortunate thing for mankind in one sense. In another sense, it is not a great loss because after all you count them important for their consciousness and not for what they say or organize for humanity, but for what they stand in consciousness. But it would be better certainly if we had a chance of knowing in full what they had intended to leave as their view of the cosmos. In fact, what is recorded is only by his immediate disciples. It is gathered in Sutta, you see. Then three parts of Tripitaka. The one is the Vinaya. Vinaya is the law, means the observances to be maintained by or kept by the monks. You see, Vinaya is the code of discipline. Books containing code of discipline, what a monk should do and should not do. That's what it deals with. The Sutta deals with what Buddha said, doctrine. And then Abhidhamma deals with problems of life so far as Buddhism can solve them. And that contains also Jataka, the past record of Buddha's own incarnations, 600. You see, that also is included in Tripitaka. But it's not regarded very important. These three, organization of the discipline, rules of conduct, talks of Buddha recorded by his disciples, forming the doctrine. And thirdly, the dharma, the religious dispensation or decisions given either during Buddha's life and recorded by his disciple or given by his chief disciples during their lifetime. Well, that is the the canon of Buddhism. It is a big work, but unfortunately it is not so authentic as to claim to be Buddha's own word without any change, one. And secondly, it is not dealing with the whole problem because it is only occasional recording. So that it can't be a whole aspect or complete exposition of what he wanted to say about the problems that were given to him or that is solved. That is one. And then, see, during his own lifetime, there are some incidents which are interesting. One was the old dame incident, which is well known for us to everyone. That one old lady lost her son, only son, and then she was very disconsolate, and she said that she wanted to get somebody to help her. So somebody said, there is Buddha here, right down in the town, just outside in the garden. You were to go there. So she went to him, and she said that people say that you can solve my problem of sorrow and so on. She said, yes, I can. So he said, but you say I've lost my son. He said, yes, I can solve it. Then he said that you bring me some rice. I'll give you the rice, and that will solve you. But you must go to the village or to the town or anywhere and bring me rice from a house where nobody died. So this lady went round. She thought that she will find someone. She came back and said everybody was ready to give her a handful of rice. Then she asked, but you see, the Buddha told me that I must get rice from a house in which nobody died. They said, no, in our house somebody died. You see, so when she came back in the evening, he said, see, so you see, you are not alone. You are not alone, and this is the thing that overtakes the human being, and so on, so on. That was the teaching like that. Well, another incident was about, I think, who was it? Forget now. Do I record it here? I don't remember. I think it was Anathapindik, one of a rich man in Rajgarh, you see. Rajgarh was the capital of Bihar at that time, and the king was very powerful king. But he was not a Buddhist, the king. But this rich man of the city, aristocrat, was a follower of Buddha. So he heard that Buddha was coming. Some disciples went forward. What used to be in those days was on horseback, a letter is taken and said that next rainy season, Buddha will come here. Next year, it was rainy season, you must stop. Otherwise, you must go on wandering. That's the law in Indian life. You see, spiritual life, you can go about 8 months, but 4 months you must stop because of rains. Where you are, you stop. And 4 months people come and talk, and that's how Indian culture grew, you see, and remain alive. Because all people go on wandering, and wherever there is monsoon, they will stop. So all people will come and talk to them, and then they get some enlightenment, whatever they can. So this brought me, and then the Anathapindik, the rich man, heard that Buddha is coming, so he said he must put up at the royal park, royal Udyan, the garden of the king. And the king's garden was not given in those days, you say feudal age, they wouldn't give to anyone. So Anathapindik said that I want to get the garden, and he saw that this reached the king. He didn't want to go straight away and ask him, you see, because he said if he says no, then it will be difficult to make it yes. So he said that I want to get, then king came to know about it. So the king said, oh, even if he spreads the gold mohors, gold coins all over the garden, I won't give it. So he went to the judge and said the king has entered into a bargain that he will give me the garden if I not only fill up the land, you see, cover it up with gold mohors, but give him more. What he said means that, merely spreading it over is not enough. He wants more. I will give him more. And then the king gave way because knowing the Buddha was a great spiritual figure, you see. He actually brought cartloads of gold coins and, covered the land. This is historical, I am telling you. Absolutely historical. He covered the garden with gold coins and filled up and gave it to the king. Well, that became the Jetavana Vihar. That became the famous garden of Buddhists Afterwards, whenever he visited Rajgir, the capital, he stayed there, you see. And there many other incidents happened. But this is, you will see in some of the carvings of the stones, a cart being unloaded and people spreading the gold coins. That is the record of that, the Jetvan Vihar being taken up by this Anath Pindik, the rich man, from the king, by covering the whole garden with gold coins. And third incident was at Kapilavastu, means his own native place where he went after being Buddha, means after he was 35, 5 or 7 years after that, when he had already become known as Buddha and so on. So when he went to his house, he remained in the public choultry, as you call it, public house, means where people, government house for the people who are passing on the road. There is always a traveler's caravanserai or some place where it's a rest house, you see, for the visitors. So he remained there. He didn't go to his house. When he was the prince of that small area, you see, 3 or 4 villages, but he didn't go to his parental house. He remained in the guest house of the public guest house. And then his relations, his other all people who were connected with him, related people, they all complained that why did you not come to the house? So he said, I'll come tomorrow to the house. I'll come for begging because I'm a Buddha. I'm now a man who lives on charity soil. Go and ask. And I'll ask for alms from my house, and that's how he'll come there. So when he went to his house, his father was there, and his wife was there, and so on. His son was there. And so he said that, how is that you didn't come here? You are a Shakya, means son of the line, clan. He says, I am not a Shakya. I come from the line of the Buddhas. My physical parent is not important, you see what he wanted to say. I come from the line of the Buddhas. So his wife came forward and said, well, if you are of the line of Buddhas, then your son also must belong to that line. So you must accept your son with you. He couldn't refuse, you see, because it was logical in one sense. And then he had a cousin, Ananda, who was very much devoted to Buddha, you see. His own cousin, but he had become his disciple practically, one whom he liked very much also. And he was really serviceable, great love for Buddha, to do anything for Buddha. So Ananda pleaded at night that you must accept women in our organization. Why should only men take up the Buddhistic robe, you see? Because his wife wanted to take up the Buddhistic path, you see, Yashoda. And Ananda pleaded and he consented, and his wife was ordained first, you see. That is how women got admitted into the Buddhistic fold. That was the third. Some of the incidents are like that, you see. His own cousin opposed him. One of his cousins was very jealous of him, and he tried to ruin Buddhistic organization from the inception. He tried to poison Buddha, he tried to throw rocks when he would go to the mountain, he tried to send an infuriated elephant against him, you see, and so all kinds of, to incite the monks against him and all kinds of things, you see. This is also recorded. I mean, it was his own cousin who did that. One cousin was his most ardent disciple, another cousin was his, one who disliked him most. In his own lifetime, this organization was there, but he was the leader, and the rules were not written down and turned into a code or, into a sort of code of discipline. And he was not very rigid also in his outlook, as we saw that women were admitted into his path after the 5th year of his preaching the doctrine. And when he visited Kapilavastu, his wife was ordained on persuasion of Ananda, his cousin and his favorite disciple. In 483 BC, means 3 years after his death, Ananda, his cousin who was alive, gave the sutta, the one part of the Tripitaka, one part of the Buddhistic canon. He organized it at Rajgriha, and 500 monks attended the conference, you see. And 100 years after that, 483, so you must come down to 383. Yes. At Vaishali in Bihar, because there was some laxity in the in the monks and you see in the followers. Another council was held, attended by about 700 monks or members. And there the first division of Theravada and Mahayana, means Mahayana and Hinayana came to the top, came to the fore, you see. The division came out prominently. One part making a devotional approach, another part keeping to the strict old, interpretation of Buddha as they understood it. The Mahayanists said that unless and until you take help of Buddha, you cannot attain, nirvana, or you cannot attain bodhi, as they would call it, you see. And the Hinayanists said that no, you must do it by your own effort, and so on. That's how difference came to a head. The Mahayana admitted, you see, Bodhisattva and the power of Bodhisattva to help others, whereas Gautama said that nobody can help somebody else, you see, nobody can help another. But this was done. Theravada was taken up in Ceylon, Mahayana was in Mongolia, China, Korea and Japan, and Tibet, Nepal and Bhutan developed its own interpretation of Buddhism, and Japan developed its own interpretation as Zen Buddhism. So it was 4 parts really. Hinayan, Mahayana, the Himalayan tract, means Tibet, Bhutan and Nepal, and Japan, Zen Buddhism. That's how the 4 aspects of it came to the front within about 400 years, 500 years after his death. The 3rd council was held by Ashoka, the great emperor, in his time. Under Tissa, one leader of Buddhism, very great leader in that time, and attended by about 1,000 monks. And Mahendra, the son, and Sangamitra, the daughter of Ashoka, prince and the princess, they took the order. They became Buddhistic monks and took a branch of the Bodhi tree to Ceylon. That is recorded in many paintings and historical, sculptures and so on. And even Ceylon, it is a very big event, you see, because the taking of the branch of original tree of Bodhi tree to Ceylon by the prince and princess who became monks, you see. And that is how Ceylon was converted to Buddhism. Well, and they participated in this conference, and it is they who carried the branch of Bodhi tree to Ceylon. The 4th was only a partial conference, but it was called by King Kanishka, emperor in the northwestern part of India, near the Punjab, you see, near Afghan border. And it was attended about 500 monks. In 2nd AD, means nearly, you see, about 400 years after his death, Nagarjuna, a great leader, gave a great support to Mahayana school of Buddhism. He was in the south of India, near Madras, you see. He was a great chemist, this Nagarjuna. Very great metallurgist and chemist. In fact, he was one of the founders of Indian chemistry, you see. And he brought the Buddhistic outlook near to the Indian monistic stand, Vedantic stand. He changed the turn of Buddhistic thought into very near the Indian stand, you see, in 2nd AD, by admitting Dharma Dhatu as a cosmic element. Just as there is Brahman here, so he admitted Dharma Dhatu is prevalent everywhere, and you have to awaken Dharma Dhatu in you, he would say. Dhatu is element or substance, what you call, you see. And the substance which can answer to Dharma. So he said that is an all-pervading element, something which took the place of the monistic outlook of Vedanta. You see, was brought in by Nagarjuna. And in the 3rd century AD, there was a further approach to Indian way of interpretation of Buddhism by Yogachara school. The school itself is called Yogachara, in which meditation became a very important part of following a Buddha, you see. And Maitreya, Asanga and Vasubandhu were the leaders of this after Nagarjuna. Well, that gives you a rough idea of the picture of how Buddhism went through, its course of development and metamorphosis throughout the centuries from 4th or 5th BC to about 5th AD, 1000 years, you see. Now, if we'll take up the doctrinal part afterwards, you see. Esoteric Buddhism is there also, It's a very large field, but we wouldn't want to enter into that esoteric part because that is just the same thing as tantric. Tantra is Buddhistic and pure Tantra also. Buddhistic Tantra is there, Nepal has got Tantra, Tibet has got Tantra. Well, that is, really speaking, esoteric Buddhism or occult Buddhism. And that is a special branch, and I don't think that there is any use of taking that part up. This Nagarjuna explained Shunyavad of the Buddha, means void, nirvana was supposed to be void. So explain nirvana by saying that it only means that existence is relative, that's all. That existence is relative and not absolute. Well, that's how they came very near the Indian standpoint and tried to retain Buddhism. But after 5th century, I think that when Shankar came on the scene in the 7th and 8th century, well, Buddhism had already become, moribund, decadent. Very much of its original force was lost. Lot of change also had taken place, and Buddha repudiated Vedic rites and ceremonials and performance of religious rites and so on. He depended on personal effort. And he refused to admit the authority of the Veda. So many of those things which went against the mentality of the current people at that time, well, slowly the admission of monks into the order, and then maintenance of discipline into the order, then admission of women into the order, then division of the order into two, human society into two parts. All these introduce many elements of weakness in the organization, you see, and the original impulse was lost. So Buddhism could not stand against the rejuvenation or the renaissance of, the original Vedic outlook, which took form of positive affirmation in Shankar's, approach to the problem of man. When Shankar came, well, he gave the last blow to Buddhism from India, because his logic was very clear and keen, and he founded himself on the old tradition of the country and gave an interpretation which did not require Buddhistic outlook at all, and yet was, in some aspects, something what Buddha also wanted to say. That is why the Orthodox Indians regard Shankar as one who is concealed Buddha. He is a Buddhist but concealed, because he believes what Buddha believed, but says in a way in which you would say that it is not Buddhistic. For instance, Buddha said that, you see, all is unreal. Well, that is what Shankar said, that the world is Maya. You see, now, he said it is Nirvana. Shankar said it is Brahma, that's all. Brahma who doesn't act, who is away from action, he is stable and static and not active and without qualities, and so it became absolutely very near what Nirvana would amount to, you see. So that there are people, philosophers and critics who charge Shankar with being Prachanna Buddha, means one who is hidden Buddhist, one who is Buddhist, under garb. Well, that gives you the rough idea of the outer aspect of Buddhism. Well, the doctrine aspect we'll take up tomorrow, as to the belief of Buddha and his remedy. That we take up tomorrow for consideration, because some part is there which I have to get ready. But this is what, partly it is ready here, but it's rather late now.
Like any contribution to the order?
Well, he was one of the monks, Rahul. He became one of the monks, but it was not as if it was anything special in the sense of his eminence or nothing of the kind. It's not recorded anyway.
That's a good one.
Hmm?
Was Sri Aurobindo, was he also Buddhist?
Personally, I don't think, but I can't say what Sri would have said. Personally, I don't think.
Well, you know what I mean. Was he acting the role of Buddha? The same.
No, he affirmed that he acted as Krishna.
He affirmed that.
Yes, he affirmed. That I know on authority, so that I can say. Not only on my authority, but on his authority. But that is for disciples and not for public. Those are things which are not much important for public.
The one light comes in many faces.
Yes, no, he referred to his personality. That way light is common. That way he can say that I was all the light that came. But that is referring to the divinity. This referred to his personality.
Oh, I see.
The personal aspect, yes, remember, yes. It is not the same as saying essentially the divine is not this, that of course it is one. In the individual and most personal aspect he was speaking of. I'd seen Buddha. And
Well, in that booklet, she said that he was, every time a crisis, he was awed, as much as to refer that Sri Aurobindo was the personality that played the role at that time of the prominent.
yes, yes. No, Mother had a contact of Buddha's personality. I mean, Mother had a very living contact with Buddha's personality in her own sadhana, in her own spiritual development. Apart from the incarnation aspect of it. But she had a very tangible experience of Buddha's presence when she was in Japan. There was some trouble, and so she had to go from France to India, but there was some trouble in India, so she went to Japan. In 1918 to 1920 she was in Japan. 1 year and 8 months.
Did he ascend into the supermind?
It doesn't seem.
No.
It doesn't seem that he reached the supramental level. He reached the level, it seems, where the personal aspect or ego aspect is overpassed. And then mind also is made still, you can say silent. And then beyond the mind you enter into a plane of consciousness which to the mind appears as if it is, well, zero, the unknowable, indescribable. In Christian mythology or in Christian scripture they speak of the dark, is it not? The divine darkness, is it? Yes, the darkness, that is about divine darkness. It is called the divine darkness. It is not darkness of ignorant fear, but it is the journey through the unknowable, so to say, unknowable to the mind. You see? Yes, they speak, yes, there is a dark, yes, the divine darkness. I know distinctly that there is a word called divine darkness is used. And, that is the region where you leave the mind and have not yet entered the supermind. And then when you come back to the mind, it always it appears as if it was something unknowable, something which you can't give any name to, cannot give any description of, unless you reach some consciousness across, so to say, either higher mind, intuitive mind, inspirational mind, or over mind. You can say something, but if you are only living mind and living a silent and vacant mind altogether, and have not yet, your spirit has not yet ascended, well, naturally you describe it as if it was nirvana, means cessation of being, or withdrawal into a silence, withdrawal into a complete inactivity. Even if it is positive existence, it is a withdrawn existence, so to say. A existence in which you are not drawn to a thought, not drawn to a desire. You are not attracted by anything that life can offer. In fact, you have outstripped the plane of life, plane of mind. And you are in a plane where neither thought nor vital, ambition, desire or impulse has any attraction or place even. But that is nirvana. The plane of complete self-withdrawal, if not a complete self-annihilation or self-extinction, so to say. The self is extinct completely in the sense of the ego. And it doesn't mean that therefore you cease to be completely. Because even after Nirvana, Buddha acted. That is what we will see tomorrow when it comes to observation of his whole doctrine, that Nirvana would not amount to saying that there should be no action. In fact, after Nirvana only he acted, and acted most puissantly. Nirvana and action cannot be held to be contradictory. They are contradictory by Buddha's own life. That is after Nirvana that he acted most powerfully. Yes. And yet, he might not have wanted to act. I mean, the ego might not have been there. What I mean is, personally, he would not have wanted, I must act powerfully. Not at all. He must have been withdrawn and completely impersonal.
Yes.
Yes, and allowed the nature to happen or to do whatever it wanted to, and well, it was a powerful action. So that some intention of the cosmic mind or will acted through his impersonality. From our point of view, some powerful cosmic will acted through him, because that was perhaps the need of humanity at that time. Humanity needed the development of pure mind in search of the truth. Buddha uses pure reason. The one reason why he makes an appeal to Western mind is because he is very rational. He is absolutely rational. And this insistence on using mind in seeking for the ultimate reality or truth was first brought to prominence by Buddha in the world's history. He first acted upon it and showed that you must depend upon mind and take the conclusion of mind. It may be an incomplete conclusion. It may be a conclusion as far as your mind can take it. But you must take the courage in your hand and go forth. If your mind then admits a higher reality, you will be better prepared to go to that reality. But as far as your mind goes, you must go. And that is a great service even to spirituality in one sense. Because mind has a place in spirituality. And Buddha gave it a very prominent place. That is why he makes a great appeal to Western mind. They immediately follow and understand Buddhism. The Indian subtle mind and comprehensive mind escapes the Western mind. Because Western mind is pragmatic like Buddha's mind. Western mind is not subtle intellect. That mind went with the Greek. It never came back to these Europeans. The Greeks had that philosophic mind, idealistic mind. These people have practical, rational mind. They haven't got that subtlety of mind which the Greeks had, which the Indians have. Even a very common Indian will have a subtle mind. His mind is not dull. Mind is subtle. A complex problem he can tackle and try to think and come to something. Wrong or right, but he has got a subtle mind. That he has. But in the West it is pragmatic, it is practical reason and utility and rational mind, not idealistic or philosophic mind, which the Greeks had. Intellect from the Greeks, but it was turned from curiously idealistic and philosophic mind into scientific, utilitarian, practical mind, which is rationalism. It's just divested of some of the elevating elements of intellect. That's development.
It might be, though, that frequency was needed in order to make a complete conversion or exchange from that point and beyond.
Yes. The insistence on matter perhaps was necessary.
In other words, like everything is a line of frequencies where it would change into one form and then a conversion, a complete conversion. As we grow into higher scientific value, we realize that it goes into infinite proportions. We return again to the infinite.
Yes. Now that is the interpretation which will come slowly. The scientists are not at all willing to admit anything like that now, you see. They will have to get something which hits them like that, you see, then they will admit. But there's the same impulse, how in two cultures, the same impulse take different forms, you can see, if you go back. See, the European mind, in the European cultural environment, the spirit of adventure took the form of colonialism and empire.
For the need of growth.
Yes. For the need of even physical need of expansion of space or population or whatever it was. In India, it took the form of taking out the ethical and religious values to other countries, to the archipelago, to the Indonesian countries, the Singapore, Malaya, and Hong Kong, and China and Japan. It didn't take this colonial form. It takes the form of converting the belief of man and his conduct and influence, his thought and values of life and so on. They went and must have done trading also. I don't say that they only went with their religious ideas only. But trade was there, but more than trade was this also was important. And the spirit of adventure was more visible in this aspect than in the other, because if they were really after money, they would have tried to get at social or political power, you see. Mm-hmm. But in no part of this where they went, they didn't try to establish any political domination. Even in Africa, Indians were the first to go to Africa, even before the Europeans. The Germans and Englishmen came afterwards, after the Indians were there in Nairobi and all these places. It is history, I am telling you. And Indians were very prominent. It is they who first gave these Arabs and the Africans the first contact of the outside world. And they first made the Arabs understand a lot of Indian ideas and carry them in their life in the eastern part of Africa, Nairobi and Uganda and so on. When the Europeans came, they came with their guns and with their men of war. And so it was only fight. Either you fight or you don't fight. At that time, the one who held the purse of money in Nairobi was an Indian. And he advised this Arab king that, you see, you have not the scientific progress, so better make peace with these fellows, otherwise you will have nothing left. And in fact, his advice came well healthy for that man, because he said, all right, so now there is a good part reserved for the Arab prince who came to terms with the British, with the English. It was for the Germans and then the English.
Isn't it some sort of a divine plan and pattern underneath all?
Yes, the whole thing that comes out is some values stressed at some point in culture, which tend to find expression, and whatever is one-sided in that, it gets corrected by historical life, by contact with other people, or by knock in the political development of the race, and so on. Like that, it gets adjusted till the fundamental values get stressed and something which is of the common importance emerges out of it. India's difficulty was they were too individualistic and they have no collective life. That was a great defect. Why they were even in a majority at points, they couldn't make themselves well because they had no collective consciousness. There are many places outside India where they were in a distinct majority. Even now they are in a majority in this British Guiana and other parts. They form the greater part of the population. They can't make themselves because they have not that collective consciousness. Mm-hmm. And collective consciousness is also a term of expression of the inner consciousness, which Europe has developed very well. So that way, you see, Europe is in advance. What are developed in the collective life also are very important. Mm-hmm. Democracy and equality and organization of social life and politics and so on. Mm-hmm.